Welcome to episode 3 of ClarkCast. I'm your host, James Clark. I'm really excited for today's episode because we've got 3 segments that I really liked. We have, first up, a story about me and my roommate, a funny situation we found ourselves in. After that, we have some world building I've been working on for a project. Been working on it for a while. I read a little bit of it to you. And after that, we have my thoughts on a book I've been reading that I've really enjoyed, The Dark Forest. Uh, I really enjoyed it. So let's just get straight on with ClarkCast, shall we? For our first segment, I'm going to tell you a story. A story that happened to me. Um, I don't know. It wasn't that far ago. It's like maybe a couple weeks ago. So it all began when I left my room, my dorm room, and I realized that left the key. I had left the key in like my backpack, which has the key in it. I had left it all behind inside my room. So I couldn't get back in my room. But I did have my wallet. And so I could get like in and out of the building, but not my room. So I just did what I normally do because I didn't have to go back in the room for because I had to go to a class and I really wouldn't need my stuff for this class. It was like an art appreciation. I mean, you don't need stuff for that. So I had to do that, and then I was probably going to get lunch after. So it's like, it's not urgent for me to go back in my room anytime soon. So I just text my roommate, and I don't know, let's just pick a name out of thin air. Let's call him Duke. Duke. So, yeah, I text Duke and I'm like, hey, um, could you unlock the door for me? It's no rush. Just next time you go in to our room, could you just leave the door unlocked? And he sends me a thumbs up. So I'm like, okay, sure. And so I go to class. When I get out of class, I see he sent me an emoji. He sent me like the emoji of a lock, and then next to it the emoji of like an unlocked lock. And so I take that as he's unlocked the door. So I'm like, okay, thanks. And I go to lunch. So I eat lunch and I'm maybe like, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes of lunch. And I come back to the room and I try the door and the door is locked. And so I'm like, huh, that's weird. And so I text him. I'm like, "Hey, the door is still locked. I don't know if you locked it back or something. Just I do need to get in my room now, so just let me know if you're in the building or whatever." I was hoping he was in the room. He could let me in. So, and he's like, "Oh, dang, I'm stupid. I'm in the bathroom." I'm like, "Okay, that's strange." So I have to go to the bathroom anyway. So I go to the bathroom to poop, and I'm like, "Oh, what a coincidence. I'm also in the bathroom." No response. And so I'm like, "Oh dang, I overestimated our friendship." And so now I'm sitting there in like complete silence. And I think he's like 2 stalls down from me. And I'm sitting there in just in complete silence. And I must wait at least 10 minutes. At least 10 minutes. It felt like longer, but at least 10. We're just sitting there in complete silence. And so eventually I'm like, well, look, I would really prefer he get up first because like he needs to unlock the door because like if I get up, I just have to sit by the door. But I've been waiting here too long. Like this is getting weird. So I stand up, and as I stand up, I hear a few stall downs. He also stands up. I'm like, what? And I go to unlock the door, and I hear he also unlocked the door. I'm like, okay, what is going on? And I just sit there, I just wait. And finally I get out and I walk back to the room, and he still hasn't unlocked it. So I just sit by the door for a while. And a few seconds after, Duke, that's just what we're calling him, just walks out and says, "Oh, hey, yeah, I'm stupid," and unlocks the door as if nothing had just happened. As if nothing had just happened. And then we just both go in there in complete silence and just like sit next to each other. Like, what? So yeah, that's the story. Yeah, that's that's all the story there is. So segment number 2, we're going to talk about world building project I've been working on for a while. Yeah, it's been since like last semester. So quite a bit I've been working on this. And it's kind of been off and on. But yeah, it's this world building project. I call it Imbara. I'll probably put a map on like the image. But I've kind of just been writing it as it comes to me, and then I kind of just refine it by rewriting it over and over again. Um, Today I'm gonna read the first two clay tablets that I've written thus far. Um, yeah, so just bearing in mind this is all probably subject to change, but it's where I'm at thus far. In the beginning there was Arlvigion, and his form was all, and it took up the entirety of all that was. Arlvigion took his flesh, and with it made the land and the sea, and at the cost of his flesh the land and the sea were made. And Alregion looked at the land and the sea, and no light shone upon it. Thus Alregion took his eyes and made 4 great lights. To rule day he made Sol, to rule night he made Mole, and to aid these he made Dole and Roll. Thus were affixed lights to the head at times, and shined through the cost of his eyes. And Alregion felt the land, and it was without texture, uniform. Thus Alregion took his bone, and made all kinds of vegetation across the world, changing in form and make across the land. At the cost of his bone he did this. And Alregion felt the land, and it was without movement. Thus Alregion took his blood and veins, and made creatures of all kind and make across the land. At the cost of his blood and veins he did this. And after these things, Alregion was left without his body. Thus his spirit entered 2 stones, and became Alexer and Rithnir, 2 halves of one whole. Alexer and Rithnir were alone among the beasts of the earth, and sorrow filled them. So taking 200 cattle, they reshaped them, and made them to stand upright like themselves, and called them man. Man walked with the 2, but was without wisdom. So Alexer breathed into their mouths, and opened their eyes, and they had thought of their own. Man walked and thought, then, but had no word. So Rithnir breathed into their mouths, and opened their hearts, and thoughts, which were within them, began to echo through their breath. Thus the 2 made man, and lived among them. So yeah, that's just the first 2 tablets of what I've written. I like it. I might add more. I like the idea of like one main deity that like used to exist in prehistory but doesn't exist now. So that was kind of the idea behind Alregion. Um, but yeah, that's the first bit. I'll probably do more installments later. I'm still kind of refining it, so there's that. So in this segment, we're gonna talk about this book I've been reading. I've been reading these books, the Three Body Problem series. I can't remember how do you say the author's name? Is it is it Cixin? He's Chinese. He's Chinese, so I don't know how to say his name, but I think it's Cixin Liu. Correct me in the comments if you know. But anyway, great books. I've read the first one, and I'm like about halfway through the second one. But recap thus far for what you need to know for today's discussion. So there's this alien race called the Trisolarians, and they are fleeing their planet because the conditions are unstable. That's all you need to know. The conditions are unstable, and they're going to come to Earth and wipe humanity out. They're going to wipe humanity out, and they have incredibly advanced technology, um, which they programmed these protons to they've programmed these photons to be able to like record data and be controlled remotely, so they can basically be have surveillance at any point in the galaxy, anywhere. They can they can move at the speed of light, so they can be basically in two places at the same time. So they have complete surveillance over the planet, and they have incredibly advanced technology, and they're coming to Earth to wipe out humanity and live on Earth because their planet can't support them anymore. And humanity only has 400 years before they arrive to figure out some kind of solution. And so, because the Trisolarians have surveillance over all of Earth, they devised this plan where they select these four people and they give them practically unlimited power and no oversight to just make a plan and don't tell anyone what it is to try to destroy the ship or reach some kind of solution. So they have basically unlimited power and practically no oversight. So, and they call them wall facers. So that brings me to the point of discussion here is, what would I do if I was a wall facer in this situation? So the first thing that occurred to me was that I would take orphans, like really young, and I would take like a bunch of them, like at least 1,000, and I would take them to like this facility where we would give them like the best education and the best child care and like the best of everything. Like they would be the most intelligent, strong, and fast. They'd be the greatest humanity has to offer. And they would have the choice whether or not to fight the Trisolarians or not. And the ones that do fight them would be the perfect soldiers in the war. That was my first plan, is that that's what I would do, and I would let the other wall facers kind of use them. But then I thought, well, it's not really feasible though. And I don't know, I mean, like in this kind of situation, you would definitely want something that you can get a guarantee out of. And you can't really get a guarantee out of that. So as useful as they might be, I don't know what the other wall facers' plan is. So I don't know if they would even be useful. So then I had a different plan. Okay, well, what if I make a massive telescope and I tell everyone that the idea behind the telescope is that we're going to look directly at the Trisolarian ship, and we're going to like see it in better definition, and we're going to be able to determine exactly where it is and what it looks like and see if there's any weaknesses we can pick out. And that's what I would do. That would be my contribution. But what would actually be is that secretly the telescope would be a giant laser that would use massive amounts of power to shoot an incredibly refined and small laser at the Trisolarian ship, which would hopefully melt some important part or just generally cause some amount of havoc. Because remember, we don't necessarily need to like completely destroy the ship. It's a spaceship, so if we can just destroy the vacuum sealing, then we can kill everyone on board. But then I was like, well, I don't know enough about telescopes and lasers that I could secretly do that. Like, if I did, that would be an awesome plan, but I would have to communicate somehow to someone who did know, hey, by the way, turn this telescope, have it so that it can be a laser. But by saying that, the Trisolarians would be ready for it, so I couldn't do that. So then I thought, okay, well, it's not feasible to try to destroy them. There's just too many unknown variables. So what about this? Instead of putting all of those resources into trying to destroy the ship, what if we prepare Mars to be a colony for them? What if we give them Mars? Because think about it. Mars, to us, sounds terrible. Because it's cold all the time, and there's nothing alive there, and all the water is frozen. Nobody would want to live on Mars, unless you're like an astronaut or something for science, but nobody would want to live on Mars just for the sake of it, That's not a good place to live. But from a Trisolarian point of view, think about their planet. Sometimes it gets so cold that the oxygen in the atmosphere crystallizes and falls as snow. Sometimes it gets so hot that the surface of their planet melts. Mars would be a paradise compared to their planet. So what if instead of using violence to try and stop them, we just give them an option they won't have to fight for? And it'll be better than just them picking a random planet because they'll have Earth right there to help them out. And it wouldn't interfere with the other wall facers plan because as long as they work on a big stick project, something like a really big gun or like a laser or a really big nuclear bomb, we would still have a good deterrent, a big enough deterrent for them not just to take Earth. So then I was like, okay, the biggest challenges for that would be one, I would have to convince the wall facers, because remember, there's 4 of them. I'm only one of them. I'd have to convince the other 3 not to use whatever they're going to use until it's the last option. I would have to convince them of that, not to jump for a decisive strike. Second, I would have to convince the Trisolarians, which I think would honestly be the easiest thing here. Easy to get in contact with them because they're everywhere at once. And look at it from their perspective, because the Trisolarians are very survivalistic. They're very do whatever it takes to survive. If I can just show them that it's more practical and more cost effective to take Mars than it is to take Earth, they'll take Mars. And I have the resources to make it far more practical to take Mars. The most challenging aspect of this plan is humanity. I would have to convince humanity at whole to just be okay with supporting and being a neighbor to a race of aliens that wanted to genocide them, and probably still would if they got the chance. I would have to convince them of that. And I'm not entirely certain that I could. Now, strength of this plan is that I can tell anyone about it. I might keep it hidden from humanity for a while because I don't know how they'll react, so I'll probably work on that for a while. But I can tell the other wall facers, and I can tell the Trisolarians all I want. So that would be very helpful, just to be able to tell anyone. And to be honest, if they did try something, they would probably be easier to kill on Mars than they would on a spaceship, at least in the early stages. Now, another issue with this plan is that the Trisolarians are going to grow, and eventually they're going to want the resources on Earth. Regardless of how long Mars ties them over, eventually Earth is going to look appetizing. So we would have to figure out some way to make Earth and the Trisolarian civilization on Mars interdependent with each other and not afraid of each other and trusting each other. It's a very tall order. But honestly, I think it's more feasible than any of the other options. I can't think of a better option. I mean, if it came down to it and it was better for the most people just to blow up the ship and be done with it, I would. But think about the technology the Trisolarians could give us. We could eradicate hunger. We could cure cancer. Think of all the things that could be done if we had access to that alien technology. It's an amazing idea. Think of the ways that we could explore the cosmos if we had access to those remote controlled photons. So, and I mean, I think it's more feasible than the other plans. So one wall facer, his plan is to like revive is to join suicide bombers. He's going to send these bombers out there into space where they will destroy the ship basically by running into it. I don't think that's feasible because A, you have to get pilots and nobody wants to die. And B, he wouldn't go with them. Like, I don't think it would even occur to him. Because it's very, very difficult to convince someone to die. And it's significantly more difficult to convince someone to die if you're going to continue living. That's why I think that plan is going to fail. And he would need a lot of ships in order to do that. I mean, he has 400 years. You can get a lot of volunteers in 400 years, but can you get a lot of good volunteers is the question. The other one is working on a nuclear bomb. And the idea is to create this massive nuclear bomb and fill it up with basically shrapnel, like a fragmentation grenade. And it'll basically explode and send fragments out onto the ship. But I don't necessarily think that would work because A, we don't have enough intelligence on the ship to know what it could take. And B, we don't really know if that would even hit. So I don't necessarily like that plan. I could get behind it, but I don't like that plan. I want a plan B. Like I like that one cooking, but I'm not going to put all of humanity's survival be dependent on a really big nuclear bomb. The third plan I think is the worst. This scientist, he's going to try to study the human brain, and he's going to try to speed up human evolution in order to create super intelligent humans who will be able to solve the problem. Some issues I have with this plan. A, how do you know that a more evolved or more super intelligent human, perhaps super intelligent is a better word, would even be willing to engage in violence to save the human race. They might just choose to stand aside and let the Tricelorians destroy us all. Secondly, why do you assume that a more intelligent human race would be able to work together more? Intelligence is not necessarily indicative of the skills to get along with one another. Third, if the best minds now can't come up with a good solution, I don't have a lot of faith that a bunch of really good minds would be able to do it. Because you'd have to rely on a genius. Because the way that I look at it, perhaps perhaps this is flawed, but this is the way that I look at it, is that they're trying to make the average human be as intelligent as a genius now. But we have access to all the world's geniuses now to try and solve the problem, and we're not getting anywhere. If you have 100 geniuses in a room, adding 1,000 more really isn't going to help. So we would be relying on geniuses among the genius population. It's just, there's too many unknowns. Nothing is guaranteed. I'm not willing to stake humanity's survival on that. So realistically speaking, the only option that I can see working would be to work on deterrence to make Earth less viable to take, because they can take it. But if we can make it so that we say, hey, if you live on Mars, we'll send you resources, we will help you get set up. That looks a lot more appealing than having to go through a battle, which, yeah, you'll win, but how many will you lose? Yeah, so that's my plan. If I was a wall facer in this situation, um, let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments, but do try to avoid spoilers. But they are very good books in the Three Body Problem series. I would recommend them to anyone. Very good think about it books in a way. You kind of have to think about them a lot. Another interesting thought these books bring up to me is the relationship between power and responsibility. The main character, Lu Ji, this might be a minor spoiler for like the beginning of the book, so just, I mean, it's not that bad of a spoiler that's in the book, but Lu Ji is this common man. He's just your run-of-the-mill scientist, and he is selected out of the common populace, seemingly at random, to become a wall facer, and he is given no choice in the matter. Lu Ji then uses that power he's been given to move to the mountains and live the rest of his life in luxury. And it's interesting, because although Lu Ji never chose that power and responsibility, there still seems to be a responsibility that he would use it towards the betterment of mankind. It makes me think of Spider-Man, because as Spider-Man and Uncle Ben always say, with great power comes great responsibility. And that usually works pretty well in my head when someone like a political leader who got elected, or a more military leader who got some kind of coup or something, or maybe even someone who got a throne by succession who killed all the pretenders. If you seek out power, it makes sense that the responsibility that power would go with that power. It makes sense. A king should look out for his people. A president should protect his people. He has that responsibility to go with that power. But Spider-Man never chose to have his power. It would be very different if Spider-Man chased down that radioactive spider and forced it to bite him. But instead, it's completely by accident. It could have been anyone, and it could have been no one, just as easily as it was him. And yet, he still feels this responsibility to use his power for good. Even though he never chose it. It seems that power, regardless of how it has been gained, is always hand in hand with responsibility. That's why it seems so wrong that Lu Ji does nothing for humanity. In a way, you and I are a lot like Spider-Man or Lu Ji, because where we are and things we have not chosen in any way still give us some amount of power, some amount of ability that other people don't have. Our talents, our families, just the place we were born, all gives us advantages and disadvantages, all gives us responsibility. It seems that it would follow each and every one of us must use the power we've been given responsibly. Interesting thought these books give me. They're very thoughtful books. I'm quite fond of them. By the way, if you're curious what image I used for the picture in this part of the podcast, it's a really interesting image. It's the surface of Venus. Um, this is just from memory, but I think it's from a Russian satellite, and it's one of the only ones we have. I think it may be the only one that we have. But yeah, very cool image, very spacey, so I thought it'd be cool for this sci-fi section. Well, alright, there lies episode 3 of ClarkCast. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I know I really enjoyed making it. And as always, do your best, and remember, tomorrow is always a new day.